Hey church, welcome to another video of COVID Conversations. We hope that these videos have been an incredible blessing into your life. I'm about to introduce you to a great friend of ours, Pastor Wayne Crook. I'm speaking to him live from Hong Kong, where he is the pastor of Sky City Church. So make sure you sit back, grab a cup of tea, and allow these words to speak life into you in this season. And we are joined by a great friend of ours, Pastor Wayne Crook, all the way from Sky City Church in Hong Kong. And we've known Wayne for a number of years. And if you have been with us on the Influence Church journey for a while, you remember Pastor Wayne came for a special guest Sunday back in November 2013. That's a long time ago, Wayne.
Unbelievable.
A long time ago. I had a lot more hair and you look exactly the same. And my residing memory of that trip is the two powerful messages that Wayne brought, and also taking him up to the top of the castle in late November and him coming down with just frozen ears and possibly not being able to preach in Barnard Castle that evening.
And
frozen fingers. We managed to thaw you out on the way to Barnard Castle and you did preach. So welcome, Wayne. So good to have you with us.
Hey, so good to be here, Ben. And thanks for having me on and just joining in, having a chat with you guys. And what an absolute honor, and greetings from the beautiful city of Hong Kong just before the sun really sets here. I'll give you a bit of a look. And there it is.
Oh, look at that.
And so what I love about this is my office here. What I love about it, I'm just going to make sure I'm pointing to the right side. What you're looking at there, that is Hong Kong Island. And then over there, oops, I'll get out of the way, but that is Kowloon. And for those of the history buffs, right down here, I'll get out of the way again, but that's the old Hong Kong airport.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, where you can fly in over the city, over the mountains and all of that. So if we were in 1975, we would be watching aircrafts land right back out there. So there you go.
That's amazing. I have been to Hong Kong once, Wayne, to the airport, and just had to wave to you out of a rainy window. And I don't think you picked it up on Twitter until about 5 hours later. But the thought was...
It was a 5-hour delayed wave reception.
Yeah, that's right. So, Wayne, give us a bit of your backstory. Obviously, you're right there in the heart of Hong Kong, but you're not speaking with a local dialect. You're obviously not from there. So just give us a bit of the backstory that's brought you to this point.
Yeah. I'll give you the quickest version I can. Sure. I grew up, obviously I'm Australian, grew up in Australia, but my father is an engineer. And in fact, he did a lot of projects. He was a railway engineer that worked throughout Asia, and so traveled a lot from Australia to cities like Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangkok, and was working on projects there. So as a kid, and in fact, I've got 3 brothers, and we all traveled a lot with our parents whenever they would, work on these sort of expat projects. So Hong Kong became a familiar city growing up. It was one that I fell in love with pretty quickly. And for all the obvious reasons, the people are amazing. The food is incredible, and it's just a vibrant, thriving city. And that's back in the days of, when it was a part of Britain. And as you remember, up until 1997. So, it's a city that I've loved ever since being a young boy. And then I moved here at the age of 20. The short version is at the age of 20 in 1994, I moved here to take up a 2-year post as a youth pastor for an international church here in Hong Kong. And I'm still here.
Not still a youth pastor?
So no. So basically, I once I landed here, about a week or 2 after landing, I met Melody, my wife, who's American. She's the daughter of a missionary couple who are now retired in the United States. So we were married within 18 months of meeting each other.
Wow. And
then our daughter Kayla was born here in Hong Kong. She's unique. She's an American Australian, Hong Kong born. She doesn't know where she's from. So so our kids have got a very unique heritage here as well. So that was it. We've only had 4.5 years, 5 years in Australia and 1 year in the United States, but the rest of the last, what does that make it now? 26 years has been here in Hong Kong. So yeah, we now fast forward. 2010, we pioneered Sky City Church, which meets on the roof of the third tallest building in Hong Kong.
That's
and
amazing.
you only have to go onto YouTube and Google Sky City Church, and you'll see some guys that came up with their backpacks and climbed outside the building. It's a pretty crazy video. So,
Wow.
so we passed the sky, and we're now in the middle of a pretty major sort of life transition. We've now our church is transitioning and has become a part of the IC Church family from Australia, much bigger church movement than our own, and that's just a part of a family journey that we're on at the moment with our kids being back in Australia. So we're now going to be doing a lot more commuting between cities post-COVID, of course. So anyway, that's a bit of it. We just love a bit of the background. We just love Hong Kong, love this city, love the people, and with this really is home for us. So anyway, that was. I said I'd keep it short. That was the short version.
No, that's great. That's great, man. So, the whole purpose of these COVID conversation, this is our third episode, is just to touch base with some people, some in the UK, and then we had some guests from Melbourne, actually David and Sally Dowry, last week talking about marriage. And the idea is just to help people to navigate some of the stuff they're going on in this season. Now, you would be a little bit possibly ahead of us in that, which is why we wanted to talk to you today on in and around the theme of kind of endurance and what it means in a spiritual context to kind of keep going in that. But just again, I guess a quick answer, because it could be a long one. What's the lay of the land COVID wise in Hong Kong at the moment? Because we've obviously been in this lockdown by the time they watch this, probably 7 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. You guys have experienced something much longer and obviously different with the riots and everything else as well.
Yes. First of all, I just want to say that I think what the United Kingdom is going through and many other parts of Europe is amongst the most serious in anywhere in the world. Wow. And you just need to know that our prayers and thoughts and hearts are just going out to everybody that might be watching this, but certainly to your church, to your family, and to everybody in the United Kingdom. We've got so many friends over there, and I do think that the challenges that you're facing are unique. I think that they're unlike anywhere else in the world, and so it's very difficult to compare Hong Kong with the United Kingdom. But you're right, we have been on a journey that has been incredibly challenging because, when you've got these sort of challenges, there's economics involved, there's politics involved, there's health and, personal issues, spiritual matters involved. It's very complicated, and our city has entered into COVID-19 on the piggyback of, on the back of 7 months of the worst, political uprising in our city that we've seen historically ever. Wow. As a city, and so it's been challenging. But I guess because we were on the doorstep of China, Hong Kong was one of the first cities to be the recipient of those that were carrying the COVID-19 disease. Okay. And it's an interesting response. It's interesting to see how different cultures around the world have been approaching this. Sure. The only thing I'll say here, just in keeping this short, is that Hong Kong had the benefit of coming off the back of SARS in 2003. And so I think inbuilt into every person here is a self-protectionism that is unlike any other society or culture that I've ever been to. So the moment there was a whisper of disease or anything coming, out come the surgical mask, out comes the hand sanitizer. And even back in January, we were seeing people out in, plastic outfits and, the face shield, the Darth Vader, shields, and the beehive keeper, whatever shields. Yep. So it's we've got 1,000, I think we've got 1,050, give or take, maybe 1,020, 1,050 cases. And we've had only 4 deaths in our city, only 4. And that's a city of 7.5 million that are living on top of one another. So So there is something to say about the response of the people of the city of Hong Kong. I think it's been a collective effort of everybody
Sure.
being responsible for, personal hygiene. And, my personal opinion is I think the surgical masks that are prevalent here, you can't go anywhere without seeing them.
Yeah.
I think that makes a very big difference in keeping the disease at bay.
And those sorts of the phrase they use in the media is PPE, personal protection equipment. That sort of face mask, certainly, having spent a lot of time in Cambodia, that's prevalent all the time, regardless of disease and virus. Just in terms of people in heavy traffic, and you've got a family of 5 on the back of a motorbike, but they've all got the masks on. So I think it's quite alarmist over here when we do see people. And you've been to Richmond. We're in rural towns in the north of England. So, but there's even only 1 or 2 people I've seen walking around with them. But it's countercultural. You go, wow, okay, you don't expect to see that here, but obviously, even on normal, healthy day-by-day life, you would see that. It wouldn't be rare for you guys.
Don't you think that there's a sense, and I guess there is a cultural thing here, where in England, perhaps, if somebody's wearing a mask, there's this instant assumption that person is sick and they shouldn't be outside.
Exactly.
Whereas here, everybody just wears it so that they don't get sick, and if you don't wear one, they're like, something's wrong with you. So it's just a cultural, it's just a mindset change,
So how have you navigated that? Obviously that season therefore is a lot longer for you guys with all of the unrest, and that's brought a lot of change in the day-to-day routines. So from a Christian perspective, how have you, either personally or how have you as the pastor of Sky City, kind of navigated that in terms of speaking faith against the midst of the fear, and helping people walk through that?
Yeah. It hasn't been easy. If we go back to June 2019, that's when things really started getting difficult for us. And so one of the things we had to do was very quickly understand that when it came to the 7 months of political unrest that kind of ended when the COVID-19 started, that was a season that prepared us for incredible difficulty, I think, in navigating, turbulence, spiritually, emotionally, economically, politically. So it prepared us for that. But it was very difficult, I think, for most pastors in the city to navigate that with the understanding that within your church could be people who are either on one side or another side of a very, very difficult debate, and or a spectrum, if you will, of ideological belief systems, and and people fighting for their future. So,
right.
So we were already in a tough place then, and I think we were building resilience in terms of pushing through, helping people to understand that God is above politics, God is above despair, and all of that, and just thinking into Jesus. So it was really grasping onto worship and all those things. Now, when the virus came along in January here, I guess, and it got more serious towards, I guess, February and March, if I'm not mistaken. And It just seems like this has been going on for a year, really. But the things changed a little bit. So the virus it's not a belief system. It's not a whatever. It's just a common threat that we're all facing. And I really think that the key has been community. It really has been. The church, I think, has been one of the strengths of most people that I know that find themselves being isolated and alone. Thank God for the community of believers that we have in the church, because without it, I just don't know. I don't know how anyone could make it, really. So that's, I think, at least that's one thing that has seen us through, is that sense of community and family and team and friends and people that we can just lean into. So
that's great.
Yeah,
and we finding the same. Obviously, it's different stories, different scenarios, but that desire and that need for community. And I guess we all say that we need community, apart from the few kind of people who enjoy a bit of isolation. But even them, I think, are coming out now saying, no, I need some interaction. I need some community. And we all knew it was important before we went in, but I think there's been such a a greater appreciation for even the small bits of community we can get. Like for community at the moment, for us, it looks like join us in the chat box below, and we'd love to chat to you. And even that is just like a lifeline to some people, just the ability to. And I love it on Sunday. Like we pre-record our services, but then we broadcast them as a live video so that people can interact. And it's the highlight of my week, seeing just little bubbles of people's faces pop up, and they say, "Hey, good to see you. How's your week been?" And you think, wow, it's become so important, and something we maybe took for granted previously that now will come out with a greater level of appreciation for.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There's nothing like seeing all those love hearts and like buttons coming up at once, and knowing that the whole church is in there watching something together at the same time. And I do think that when we get back together, it's just going to be a mad dash for the church. You know, there are some people who are like, you know, there's been that mentality of like, oh, is it Sunday again? Do I really have to get up and go today? You know, maybe I'll go next week. I actually think that mentality is just going to be just gone because of now we see the privilege that we have. You know, you just can't take another thing for granted, another day for granted. And so I used to have a saying that said, actually this was written on my bedroom wall when I was a kid, and that is, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today, because if you do it today and you like it, you can do it again tomorrow. Well, we have to change that now. For don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today, because a pandemic might happen. And you know, these procrastinators and the ones that have put things off over and over again. And I think when it comes to church, I just think, you know, there's just going to be a totally different mentality now to the privilege of what it is to gather together, the privilege of community.
Yeah.
Those things, I think our minds are changing. I think our culture, there's definitely something that has or will shift the moment the chains come off and the doors open and we're able to get back together again.
That is so true. And I think one of the things that it's raised for us is the question of priorities. Certain things that you thought were so important in this season, you've now realized, I've lived without that thing for a long time. You've probably seen that meme going around that says our use for things in this season. And it's like what our use for the car used to be up here, and then suddenly it's gone down here. And our use for the internet used to be up here, but now it's gone right up. Use for coffee was unchanged, goes all the way through. But I think, there's been an assessment of priorities, and I think that's right. There's been, and we've seen that, you know, I'm not just talking about Influence Church, but as the church in England, we've seen a shift probably in the last 10 years of people's understanding. Not that there's been an influx of wrong priorities, but just life has been so busy that there's been so many of the things that could be obstacles that get in the way of being planted in the house of God. The Church of England, the Anglican Church, in the UK, would now say that regular church attendership is once a month, which is a long way. Attendance is a long way. Once a month is a long way from being planted in the house of God, and that means such a priority. So I think you're right. I think it's made us question our priorities, because suddenly now we've gone, oh, okay, my life is still going on, and yet there's been such a change in routine. So, and that's part of the new normal, right? We come back different. Don't be in a rush to get back to normality, because there's an opportunity for us to grab in the midst of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think this has been too overused yet as a word, but I really do sense that we have crossed over into a whole new era. Like this is a defining global moment where all humanity is one in facing a common foe. And it really is, I believe, you know, for decades to come, we're going to look back at this and say life just was never the same. You know, it hasn't been the same since.
Very true.
Speaking of which, I'm always excited whenever I see an aircraft go over the top of the buildings here. I'm just like, oh, you know, that's how it used to be pre-COVID. We used to fly in those things, you know?
Yeah.
So you just realize then, because at the moment we obviously can't fly, just like I don't think you can fly there. And it just seems like again, an era ago that we used to be able to travel, and we take all these things for granted. And I just think it's, we're going to appreciate the things that we didn't appreciate before so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, spiritually speaking, Wayne, when it comes to endurance and really fighting to not become so overwhelmed and distracted to stuff, but really, I did a message a few weeks ago about fighting for your faith. What's that look like for you in this season? How can you kind of speak into helping people navigate? You know, they've got all these other things going on, plus they've got the distractions of either trying to work from home or having kids from home, which I know is, you know, maybe different scenarios to you, but in terms of really enduring in your faith in this season and not just getting through, you know, we keep talking about not just surviving, but thriving. What do you think about that?
Yeah, not just getting through, but breaking through, like really pushing. For me, it's about, like I've heard a lot of different takes on this. I do think that it's challenging to have all of your regular routines completely destroyed, you know, completely thrown out the window. So, you know, meeting up with this person, well, that doesn't happen anymore. Going to this coffee shop, that doesn't happen anymore. So we're creatures of habit.
Yep.
And there's definitely a point where we have to create new habits, or at least new locations for those habits, you know. So, you know, where do we read? Where do we do our study or devotions or anything like that? We have to force ourselves to redesign new pathways to do things. I've found that challenging because, you know, you may not have the things that you need or the places to go to, but we just have to be mindful of that and be very, very intentional. I think that the greatest encouragement to me in terms of faith would have to come from Ephesians 6, where it just says, above all these things, take up the shield of faith, which you use to extinguish the fiery darts of the enemy. Now, it feels like we're under attack. That shield of faith, I think, is so important to understand what that is. And there are many different things that can represent. The one for me personally that absolutely trumps everything else is worship.
Wow.
It's just the ability to stop wherever you are and just to worship. And by worship, I mean being in a place where you can give thanks to God, where you can listen, where you can be in that atmosphere again. So practically speaking, I take a bus to work every day, and while I'm on the bus, I put my in-ears in and I'm just listening to worship, and it just puts me into that place again with the right focus, and it just sort of, it takes you out of one problem and puts you into a place of faith, of hey, we're going to get through this, we're going to be strong again. The other thing that in my experience is that I've always had a song for every season.
Okay.
And just like as a you know, I was born in 1974, but what that means is, you know, I've got all my favorite songs from the 1980s, 1983, 1984. I think those were the best years, you know, Van Halen, Police, Toto, you name it. Isn't it interesting how you can remember the songs that go with the season?
Yeah.
And so we've got to do the same in this season, and remember, it's going to be that worship that gets us through. You know, one of my favorite songs, there's so many out there, but I'll raise a hallelujah.
Okay.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder. You can hear my praises roar. So praise and worship. It's, you know, this is very basic stuff, but actually it's
so powerful.
Yes, and it has the practical effect of, for me in my life, it extinguishes the fiery darts of the enemy.
That's really good.
And it's spiritual warfare. It's how we get through the battle. And my auntie, who is she's been a traveling evangelist her whole life, and right now she's, you know, going through some health battles and challenges. But, you know, she always told me as a young boy, Wayne, whenever you're going through a tough time, just sit down at a piano, because she knew I played music.
Yeah.
And she was like, and just worship.
Wow.
Just worship, just sing. And so that's gotten me through. I think just having a song for the season, I think that can really help people if there's one thing.
That's it. And personal worship is so powerful. And like you said, it doesn't have to be, it can be sat at a musical instrument, but it can be sat in a crowded place, even with your earbuds in, just allowing. And it starts to change the atmosphere, right? Because you allow worship to navigate the atmosphere rather. And I can only imagine what buses in Hong Kong are like, or maybe a little bit quieter at the moment than normal. I don't know. But
Yes.
that heavy atmosphere, busy atmosphere, but worship just changes the atmosphere. I think that's really powerful.
Another key on that is, and very simply is, for some people, it's like, what do I listen to? What do I listen to? But go back in your mind to the last time, that God gave you a word, God gave you a breakthrough. What was the song then? Play that again, and it might just might start the flame again, stir something up again, and then just see where God leads you. So I always think it's good to be reminded of those times where the fire was strong, where God was doing something incredible, but then allowing Him to give you a song again, a new song for the season.
That's awesome, Wayne. That's awesome. Changing tack slightly for a minute, you, as well as obviously pastoring Sky City Church, an awesome church, you've got your head in business there in Hong Kong and been involved in a number of different things, even in the time that we've known you over the last 10 years or so. You got anything that you would say, just for a moment, to any of those guys out there navigating their own businesses, or maybe they work for a certain company? What's that been like for you in this season?
Yeah. It's tough for a lot of people. I realize that depending on what business you're in, people that are in food and beverage, people that are in hospitality, people that are in tourism, I mean, it's tough. There's no other way around it. So I think that, first of all, I think one principle that I've always had in business is just always putting God at the center of it. Just dedicating it to the Lord, committing to Him the plans that you have, and then allowing Him to direct your paths and to lead you. My encouragement would be to anybody, and it depends on who I'm talking to. If it was a business owner, an entrepreneur, somebody who has the ability to direct or change course within a company, it would be to, if a company is going through a hard time, but just to look for the opportunities that exist out there, that are alternatives. So one of a mentor of mine, actually a number of years ago, did say that it's important to, as soon as you can, just to diversify a bit. So just to make sure that you've got different streams happening, so that if you have a challenge in one area of business, that you actually have another to pick up to keep things going. And so I've been constantly looking for, and I know a lot of people here in Hong Kong that are looking for those alternatives, those other streams, and just letting God be, and this is from a Christian perspective, letting God be at the center of the creativity for the concepts and the ideas that He can give you. So while it may be the death of one season or one idea or one concept, and I must say it's important to be willing to let go of some things. Mm-hmm. We've got to be willing to actually, if a season is over, it's over. We've got to be willing to embrace that. But at the same time, look for the opportunity. Look for the gift that is being given to you in the middle of COVID-19 and this pandemic. And there are opportunities out there. There are new ideas out there. There are, I think, if you're into watching Shark Tank in the United States, Mark Cuban said, there are going to be hundreds of companies that will be, kickstarted out of COVID-19, dealing with things that are now necessary or needed in our society. So it's about looking for those opportunities. But I would say, from a Christian perspective, put God at the center of that. He's the genius. He's the creative one. He's the one that can open the doors and give us the pathway.
That's brilliant. And you kind of started to speak into this a bit there. One of the things we've always loved about you is creativity. And we've seen that in bag loads of the way that you do church, or the way that you've done even family life and everything else. And we connected again probably about a month ago now. Pastor Glyn Barrett pulled a group of leaders together from random churches across the world and said, hey, let's just talk together about what we're facing and how we're navigating. And you spoke for a moment in that session, in that Zoom call with maybe, there's 15 leaders, of how one of the ways that we can, not just survive, but thrive is through creativity, through innovation. What's that look like for you, either as a church or maybe personally for people, how to be innovative and creative even in their relationship with God in this season?
Wow. It's a challenging question, but at the same time, it's an exciting one. I love the opportunity that presents itself with every challenge that we go through. And so it's a little bit, I'm probably going back over some things I may have shared before, but there is opportunity in everything that we go through. And there are new paths that need to be trodden out. And it is just looking for, rather than, don't you think that we're more akin to or more comfortable with just copying what other people are doing? Because that's the easy way. It really is. And actually, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be as good as so-and-so up the road, or, to be like this church or that preacher or that leader or that business person or that entrepreneur or that singer or that whatever.
Yep.
But rather than do that, it really is just looking for what's not being done and what's not happening or what the needs are. And it's an age-old saying that says necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's true. But looking for what people aren't seeing, and I think just keeping an eye out for that really is one of the keys. I do believe that we are in one of the most exciting times as churches. Just coming back to the church with our church hats on for a moment.
Yeah.
We really do have an ability now to connect with people more than we ever have historically. I don't think that we've overbeaten this yet. I think that it's exciting to see churches going online. It's exciting to see how we're connecting with people from across the globe. And I don't think we're done yet. I think there's new ideas that are out there that are going to keep coming. When churches do get back together and meet again, I think we're going to still be doing a lot of our online content and all of that. So for us personally, we've just always looked for what the opportunities are. Be willing to experiment. Give yourself permission to make mistakes.
That's good.
That's one of the best parts of creativity, I would say. Be willing to look foolish. Be willing to be yourself. Be incredibly willing to fail. And wow. I really think that is just one of the keys. And honestly, we're all fail aversive. Like we don't want to fail, but I think we've just got to get comfortable with failure.
Yes.
And something not working. And I think that's one of the keys to creativity is just be willing to keep trying stuff. We for 18 months, we tried putting church in movie cinemas and doing church on movie screens and all of that. And we tried so many different versions. So of what it was to take church in the movie cinemas. Then it moved out to something else. We'd do something out on the streets and we'd find new ways. I just love it that we haven't stuck with any one thing. We just keep experimenting. So yeah, those are just some of my musings. My musings.
No, that's good, mate. It's good.
Yeah, there you go. That's enough.
Listen, we don't want to take too much more of your time, Wayne, but just as we finish off, anything you want to share, anything you want to speak a bit of life into. Obviously, we've got people viewing from the 4 locations of Influence Church across the north of England, but in this season, we've had people watching church online from India, Malaysia, plenty of Cambodians. We expect the Cambodians. We love them. So just take a moment maybe to, speak into the church. How do we endure in our faith? How do we keep growing? What are the opportunities? What does God want to do in this season?
Yeah. I will share maybe just a quick thought. Just recently, I had the privilege to be in Israel, and it was honestly COVID-19 had already started, but it hadn't affected Israel enough. So we feel very privileged, and that was with Pastor Glenn Barrett and a bunch of other leaders and pastors, and we were doing the Jesus Trek. And I remember Pastor Mark Foster. And Pastor Mark Foster from Audacious, he was my roommate. But we were out on the Sea of Galilee, and there was a God word that I received during that time. And now I know why, because of what we're going through now. And we were out on the boat on the Sea of Galilee. You know, they do those tours and they like to have the music playing. And then there's my favorite part of going on a boat on the Sea of Galilee is when they cut the music, cut the engines, and just let you sit out there and just listen to the wind.
Wow.
And while we were doing that, Mark was just shared a word. He just said, hey, I feel God speaking to me. He says, as we look out here over the Sea of Galilee, you know, we see all these iconic locations that Jesus preached and where he walked and where he spoke, from a boat to the water's edge, to the crowds and the masses. And we could see that with our eyes. And he said, you know, and this is where the storm took place. And he said, I just had this revelation of when the storm picks up, and you obviously got Jesus in the boat with you, but
Yep.
when the storm picks up, just trust where the storm takes you.
Wow.
And it's I don't know, it was just something that stuck with me. I don't know if anyone else paid attention, but it meant something so much to me, so I wrote it down in my journal. Trust the storm, trust where it takes you, trust where it blows you. And so anyway, that happened then, and it really resonated with me to say, okay, God, whatever storm comes, I'm just going to trust that in the storm you're there, and that where I end up, wherever that is, on whatever shore, whatever water's edge that is, that's where I'm supposed to be. And right now, you know, again, we try to stay out of the storm. We try to avoid the storm. But I think what I learned on that day, and what God started to speak to me on that day, is just trust the storm.
Very good.
Trust where it's taking you. And so now in Acts 27, there's an amazing story. It's one of, you know, I think a lot of people's favorites of the Apostle Paul on a prison ship, and it gets shipwrecked. And again, you know, there's a point there where Paul said, you know what, you've got to cut the anchors. Otherwise, we're going to get, you know, the waves are going to pummel the boat, and it's just going to be completely destroyed. So you need to cut the anchors, the things that we're using, you know, and we can apply this to our lives, where we try to hold on to where we are. But the truth is, if we do that, the storm will destroy you.
That's true.
And you've got to let the storm take you to where you've got to go. And what I love about that, that whole story on the island of Malta is that it was the king's father who was sick, and the Apostle Paul has an opportunity then to take the gospel. The guy gets healed. And basically the storm is what led the Apostle Paul to that island, and is what took the gospel to Malta. And
wow.
and so it's through that. If there wasn't the shipwreck, the gospel wouldn't have gone forth. And what a parallel we have today.
So true.
With COVID-19 and the opportunities that you have, that I have, that our churches have. Every single one of us have opportunities now in this storm. Let's ride it out, trust where God's taking us.
Yep.
and just watch what God will do. Watch the gospel go forth. Watch how lives will change. Eyes will open. Hearts that were hardened are going to, come alive again. Yeah. And so my encouragement is trust the storm.
Yep.
Trust where it's taking you. Lean into God. Don't fret. Don't be afraid. Don't fear. It's scary, but that's why we're all together. That's why we have church. That's why we have one another. Lean into your pastors. Lean into your friends. Lean into other believers that can lift you up when you're feeling down. But just trust the process, that God is in control of it all. And on the other side of this, I think we'll look back and say, in the midst of heartache and tragedy and pain and grief and loss and trauma that people are going through, there is it's almost like a fertilizer that will bring about new growth, new life, and something good for the kingdom of God. So that's my revelation, that I thank God for that. Back in Israel in February, that's helping me through these times.
Wayne, that is absolute gold. Thank you so much. That was worth tuning in for just the last kind of 3 or 4 minutes. Just so important that, yeah, I think you'd mentioned something earlier on where it's like, yeah, we can't get on board, if you like, in the sense of stop trying to scramble back. If you take that boat analogy, you've just said, we can't get back to the way it was. Stop trying to scramble and say, why have I missed out on this and missed out on that? And actually just learn to embrace, okay, there's something that God is doing. He can do something right now in the storm, and he can also take you somewhere far greater. And that's definitely the whole, if you come back to that phrase we keep using, not just surviving but thriving, that's definitely that. We didn't just survive the storm, we didn't just get back, but actually when we got to the new place, it's like, wow, okay, look what God did in that. And that's the whole point of these COVID conversations, is to try and help people navigate that, to not just get through. And that word is just so spot on. So thank you so much, Wayne. We really appreciate your time today.
Mate, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate your time. And I have to say, I can't wait to, when all of this opens up again, can't wait to get back to the UK and up and see you guys and, the castles, the countryside, the fresh air. I'm ready for some frostbite. I need it right now. It's absolutely.
We'll try and bring you back at a time of year that isn't quite as freezing. And back then, 2013, we were 2 locations. We've now got 4. We're on the journey of planting the 5th. And there's castles in most of those towns. So we could just spend a week exploring English castles and maybe preach a few times as well. But listen, Wayne, thank you so much for joining us. COVID Conversations, episode 3. Guys, make sure if this is the first video you've watched, scroll back on YouTube or on Facebook, find the other ones. And there's going to be a new episode coming out every Friday in this season to really help equip you. So thank you, Pastor Wayne. We love you and we really appreciate your time.
Love you guys.